Welcome to the January 11th, 2023 special meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a citizens advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners who are the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Citizens are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. We welcome public comment on those topics for which a public hearing has not yet been held. My name is Eric Casino. I am this season's chair and I reside in District 2. We will start introductions of the planning commissioners here in the boardroom and then move to Zoom. We'll start down here with Commissioner Hanson.
Joel Hanson, District 3.
Jim Simmons, District 3.
Doug Carmen, District 2.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Derek Day, District 1. Scott Nelson, District 3.
Commissioner Wheatley, are you on?
I am here, District 1, Helen Wheatley. Sorry, I couldn't be there for the tour.
And Commissioner Pessinger, are you there?
Evan Pestinger, District 1.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to start this out by reminding everybody that since this is very new and we have some technology issues, one of the things that has been showing up on the audio is very minor, like paper rustling and chairs moving and zippers for jackets, and everything that you don't want to hear, it shows up, and everything you do want to hear doesn't. So as a fidgeter, I have to remind myself not to be quite so fidgety. So if you guys can kind of be mindful of that too, that would be fantastic. With that, I hope that everybody has had a chance to look over the agenda. And if so, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
The agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call for the, oh, go ahead.
Should probably add a piece for a nominating committee for chair.
We'll get to that. That's actually part of what we, what I am going to be doing.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it now. Never mind.
Yep. Anything else anybody like to see at this particular point? If no, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Carmen,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
I can't hear, but I presume you called my name. Aye.
yes. Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye, the agenda is approved. Hopefully everybody's taken a chance to read over our meeting minutes from December 7th, 2022. And if so, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to approve the meeting minutes and accept the audio as the official record for the December 7th, 2022 meeting. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Carmen,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Halverson,
Abstain, I wasn't present.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye, those meeting minutes are accepted. With that, we'll move on to the public communication portion of our meeting, and we do not have anybody in the boardroom that would like to address us, but if there is anybody on Zoom that would like to address the commission, staff will call you out. You'll have 3 minutes, and if you run long, we'll cut you off.
I don't have anybody raising their hand.
Nobody's raising their hand? All right, well, we'll move on to new business. Item number 4, which is elections. And this year, we'll have a short discussion here about process, but this item gets more attention than it probably should. But after talking with some others, I think that what we're going to do, unless we have an objection about process, is move right through nominating and elections. And the second portion of what we had done before, where we did an opportunity for people to make suggestions about the planning commission, we'll do that later. But at this particular juncture, unless there's multiple objections to it, we're gonna take nominations and do an election and get this done with for the year. So with that, we're gonna start with nominations. And after we take nominations and we'll call for objections to having to vote. And if there are not substantial objections, we're gonna move right into our election. So do you have a,
Well, I would like to make a nomination, if that's
okay,
where we're at.
that'd be fine.
Okay. I know I'm not gonna put my name in it. I've only been here a year and I don't feel I'm qualified for it yet. Particularly to be the chair, so, and we got a lot of things on our agenda. I'd like to nominate Chair Casino for another year of doing that for the chair position. And I'd like to, not anything against our current vice chair, but I'd like to recommend Derek Day as our vice chair for next year.
Okay, I would accept that nomination. Would you accept that nomination?
I would.
All right, do we have any other nominations?
that.
Please say that again, Commissioner Pessinger.
Second that.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, do we have any objections to process? Hearing no objections to process, can we call for a vote? All right,
Commissioner Carmen,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
I don't know why I can't hear you, but I think you're calling me. Aye.
Commissioner Howard,
I can hear you call every other name.
I'll be,
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
aye. So for our next season, I will continue along as chair of the Planning Commission, and Commissioner Day will be our vice chair for the 2023 season. And I do want to say again that we're probably going to do it by email or call from staff, or I don't think we figured out that part yet, but the part where we give suggestions on what we'd like to see change or different or improve on Planning Commission matters, we'll still have an opportunity to do all that, but just not going to do it today.
So one thing I would say about that
Yeah,
is in the past, it's been an opportunity for the two people on the nominating committee to ask other planning commissioners their question, for what they want. And sometimes it's things they don't want it brought up.
oh,
You know, I've had people say, I kind of have a problem with this and I don't know how to approach it, or
don't want
I
to
don't
make a
want,
big deal out of it.
I don't want to make somebody mad at me about it. And so that's why we've done it that way in the past.
Do you think that the problem, or that would be alleviated more by another planning commissioner asking the question or by a staff member asking the question?
I think another planning commissioner.
Okay, then I'll work that out and make sure that even if it's me calling everybody, unless somebody else wants to do
I
it.
mean, I'll volunteer to do that. I saw the process for the last 6 years and it's always been
Yeah,
the way you
it
said,
actually-
Scott.
Yeah,
And I was gonna volunteer to call everybody anyway, before we decided to do the nominations open like this. So,
it would be better if it wasn't me too.
yeah.
Is there any issue with one person polling all the other 8? Or does it need to be split up? I'm
Yeah,
probably,
that's fine.
okay.
I do have.
Okay, does anybody care, or does anybody object to Scott and Barry breaking it up to talk to everybody else?
Helen's got a hand up.
Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused about exactly what we're talking about right now. So are we just talking about, since we didn't do a nomination?
Well, we broke the process up into 2. One was the election and the other is the suggestions for improving the planning commission on a more informal basis. And so what we're going to do now is you will probably get a call from either Barry or Scott, and then you can tell them semi-anonymously how you feel about things and what you'd like to see happen. And we'll email you guys later who to call.
That's fine.
And then if you could call sometime within the next 2 weeks, so that way you can report back to us and staff, then that would be awesome. That sound all right?
Mhm.
Go ahead, Helen.
You're muted.
Sorry. So that's different than the next rules and procedures discussion. This
Yes.
is, yeah,
Yes.
okay, I got it. I think I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll move on to item 5, which is rules and procedures. And this is where we are going to formalize and possibly vote on the amended rules of procedures for specifically our move to the atrium and our online participation policies. And with that, Chris, did you want to introduce this or say anything on it?
Yeah, move up to the table, so I'm not being picked up.
Hello all. For the record, Christina Chapeau, Community Planning Manager. So a couple of things, let me grab my mouse. What I did was update the rules and procedures. This is only the first page that was updated, which is our address here where we'll be meeting instead of the old courthouse. It's now the address here, and then you. Since we are in a hybrid, we are continuing in a hybrid fashion these meetings. Some rules or some procedures around when members should be at a meeting or when it's they can be attending in a virtual manner. And I provided you this information at the last meeting, and then it was sent out to you in your packets.
Can you address the question of what it takes as a vote for amending our rules?
To the best of my understanding. Sorry. Okay, I'm hearing things too. Sorry. It is a majority vote. I was unable to find any specifics to a 2/3 or any other type of number for amending the rules and procedures for the planning commission.
Okay, so we need 5 to amend,
Correct.
5 to amend. Okay. Commissioner Pestinger.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Did you forward my email to Chair Halverson, or Commissioner Halverson?
Yes.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. So is that the ruling of the chair? Because I still totally disagree.
I don't know where, what chapter in Robert's rules is being cited, because I did a quick search here when I received the information to try and find any mention of when 2/3 majority votes are required under the Robert's Rules of Order, since the Planning Commission's rules and procedures are silent on this particular matter. They only really talk about voting on recommendations, but this would also be a recommendation to amend your own rules and policies. I'm gonna get what I found and read it. So in chapter 8 of Robert's Rules, 2/3 vote is required in a particular circumstance. One notable circumstance is to suspend rules, or to close, limit, or extend the limit of debate. Those are the only 2 instances in which I found 2/3 majority is required under Robert's Rules. Now, if somebody else has additional information, or if you would like me to look deeper into that.
I'm gonna go to Commissioner Wheatley and then come back to Commissioner Pestinger. Go ahead,
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Wheatley.
Yeah, when Commissioner Pestinger sent out that email, I went down to the library and got a copy of I think it's the latest Roberts. And chapter 8, I don't know if you mean chapter 8, like the number, Roberts is really confusing. I will be the first to say that. But I think that what I found that supports the 2/3 argument is in the section 2.8 on constitution and bylaws, because I think this falls under the category of bylaws, because the definition that they provide of bylaws is documents that contain its own basic, or society's own basic rules relating principally to itself as an organization, rather than to the parliamentary procedure that it follows. Okay, so I think this falls under bylaws, and it states in paragraph 2.8.4, all rules that the society considers so important that they cannot be changed without previous notice to the members and the vote of a specified large majority, such as a 2/3 vote. So I think that's what applies to rules of procedure for us. I'm not sure what chapter 8, I'm trying to go to it trying to find it real quick, what the topic area of chapter 8 is. Incidental motions. So I don't think a chapter on incidental motions is applicable. I think it's the chapter on that contains on the rules of assembly or organization, and specifically the section on constitution and bylaws. That's the best I've been able to figure out.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pestinger, back to you.
Agreed with Commissioner Wheatley. I think any motions which limit the members' rights, and an example of that is including limiting debate, requires a 2/3 majority. And I sent out the references and links to that.
Do we have any comments from here in the room?
I'm just wondering what specifically, I wasn't here at the meeting, so please excuse my ignorance. I missed it because of my granddaughter's recital, but what was the specific objection? I don't know what that is.
I honestly don't know either.
I don't either.
It was whether it requires a simple majority or a super majority to change rules of procedure. That's the question we've been discussing.
Okay, what is 5? I mean, what,
5 versus 6.
well, is that what it is? I mean, 50% would be 3.5, right? So 2/3 of,
2/3.
in my brain, I've got 5 as a super majority.
No, I guess I'm just, I'm reading this, and I guess I have a question for Chris. The remote attendance, that pretty much follows what the commissioners are doing here. Is that where this come from?
That is not necessarily where it's coming from. It follows fairly closely what the commissioners are doing. But I found other, I found this language from other commissions.
Planning commissions,
Yeah, in the area.
right, okay.
So the question here is, do we need 5 or 6? And I guess I'm going to be shocked if we don't even have the 6. Like I would be absolutely shocked if we don't have 6 yays on amending this. Because maybe it's just because I'm blind to something, but it doesn't seem like it's a big deal.
But I do understand
The question,
I do understand the question that
Yeah.
Kevin's getting at.
I guess I don't, the idea of spending 20 minutes on something
Yeah.
this mundane doesn't make any sense to me, but that might be because I just don't understand all the issues here. Scott, did you have something?
Well, I was just gonna move that the planning commission adopt the proposed changes to our rules of procedure.
Well, it's been moved. Is it seconded? Do I hear a second?
Sorry, I had an outstanding question whether that was the ruling of the chair for a majority or a super majority.
I actually have to make a ruling on that?
Yeah.
All right, then,
I mean, if we have 6 votes, I don't think you have to make a ruling.
But what if it comes up again in the future?
Exactly.
All
I
right,
mean, we have to settle it at some point, but
Right, that's, yeah.
okay, well, then,
not until something passes 5.
if I have the discretion to make the decision on this, then I'm gonna say we need 6, 2/3.
Okay.
And I think that is the appropriate thing to do to protect any minority opinions
Or any
on,
objections?
or any objections. So with that, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Crawford.
I'll second it.
Oh, it's been seconded. I'm sorry. Seconded by Commissioner Halverson. Any further discussion?
Discussion?
Commissioner Wheatley? Commissioner Wheatley, you're
Oops,
still muted.
sorry, yeah. I do have a concern or a question, and it was, I was glad to hear that this came from, maybe some other sources, but the question I had about this, or the concern that I have, I certainly don't object to changing the address. I think we absolutely have to do that. But the stuff about remote attendance, how does that relate to the COVID policy stuff? Because, and how much is this making attendance? It seems like making attendance mandatory in any way. We're still in COVID, and that concerns me. And I would like more discussion about whether this is, I mean, I understand some of the reasons for it, making sure that at public hearings, everything gets due that when people come and speak, that they get due consideration. I get that, but I am concerned, and I think it's a legitimate concern about how this relates to COVID policy. And I don't want anything that doesn't leave it. Well, like tonight, I'm not here because I felt like I was getting a stomach bug from my son. And there's a certain discretion that you want to be able to have in these COVID-y times.
I don't think that this policy is directly related to COVID in any way. And it's not written specifically to that, but I do also believe that the Board of County Commissioners meets in person, and we're not just the public offering public testimony. We're here to work. And so I think that it's important for us to be here to work. It's important for us not to be anonymous. It's important for the public to be able to see us and engage us personally. And if that can't be done in person, I think I think it's appropriate to do that in person. I don't think it necessarily has to be tied to some sort of medical policy, especially since from the county's perspective, COVID restrictions are over, aren't they?
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be addressed to any of that, but Commissioner Pessinger, you still had your hand?
Yes, I would like to offer an amendment.
You're welcome to do so.
I move to amend the motion to adopt this policy, rules of procedure change to only accept the portion relating to the change of address, and to allow for the creation of an ad hoc governance committee to allow our commissioners who care about this, to work through recommended rules of procedure changes overall. This has not been updated since 2013, and there's a lot of changes in there that have vagaries and confusion in them, and I would recommend that we take the proper time to recommend a full suite of changes.
Is there a second to Commissioner Pessinger's motion?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Hanson has seconded that. We'll call for the vote to,
What a discussion.
oh yeah, we'll have some more discussion, yeah.
I had thought that we had decided that the full review would be done at a later time.
That's true. We're only working on doing this one page, and we still plan to come back on a full review, which is something
Right.
that staff is working on currently to align all the boards and commissions.
So it seems to me that since we've already agreed that we're going to do that later,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to do it now.
Right, Commissioner Day?
Well, I think we could designate a subcommittee
Mhm.
to get at the interests of some of the other members when that I think
There's
there's
clarification.
probably some work to do still with the current version. So, and I don't know what, also not knowing the timeline that staff is
Yeah.
on, so.
Well, one of the things to consider is our motion is only for what we see on it. We're not gonna go through the whole thing.
Right.
And so basically, there's two issues at hand here. One is the address and the other is the virtual attendance policy. And the way I understand the motion is the amendment to the motion is to keep the address change, but then to strike the policies on virtual attendance. And Commissioner Pessinger, I'm not sure how the ad hoc committee was involved in that. So could you please restate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my motion is to keep the address change element. I actually think there are two other elements. One is hybrid remote meeting, and the second is minority report process. And I'm asking for both of those sections to be stricken and moved to the committee for review.
Okay, so put off the minority report part and the virtual part for later is what your motion
Yep.
was. Commissioner
Yep.
Hanson, do you still second that motion?
Yeah, move with that.
Okay, so the motion is to amend the prior motion on adopting rule changes to strike the portion on the minority report and the Zoom attendance. So this vote here is just for rewriting the current motion, and we'll call for the vote for that.
Commissioner Kerman,
Nay.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Nay.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Helverson,
Hey,
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Nay, that motion passes, so. What's
No,
that? Yeah,
Bill.
the amendment to the motion passes.
Right, the amendment. to the motion.
The amendment to the motion passes.
Because it doesn't take 6.
So now the motion is only for the address change. Is there any discussion on the issue of the address change? With that, we'll call for the vote for the address change.
Commissioner Kerman,
I don't understand.
So the motion is to change our rules and procedures to meet at the atrium instead of the courthouse.
But if I still want the rest of it in for now,
The rest of it's gone.
the
So-
amendment was just passed.
The amendment passed, so we lost everything but the address.
okay.
So.
Go ahead.
Before we vote, so one of the reasons I think it could be important to have a more in-depth discussion about this is I think you bring up a real and important reason to be thinking about the remote attendance policy. I think we need to have a really full discussion about what a remote attendance policy has. I think about somebody like a single mother who has kids at home and what it would mean for somebody to have to show up at meetings to create barriers to participating somewhere here versus keeping, having the ability for somebody to more easily participate on the commission. So I think it would be worth having a more full discussion before we land on a policy, but I think there is a need for a policy for sure. So that's just why I think the amended motion is probably the right approach.
I would say also my concern is similar. I think there's a need for a policy, but I think we need to think more deeply about it. Because I could see some things in here where if 5 years in the future, a whole different group of people are sitting here and somebody wants to game the system and make it so there isn't a quorum or someone's vote isn't allowed, I could see some ways in here to make that happen. And by sending their packet to the wrong address, oh, they didn't receive it in advance, well, they're not at the meeting. So I just think it's worthwhile to kind of play all that out in advance and think about it.
Commissioner Pessinger, you had something as well?
Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, do you have any more, Commissioner Carmen? Okay, so with that, the motion is to change our rules and procedures on the meeting place portion only to move our meetings from the courthouse to the atrium. And with that, We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Carmen,
I,
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
Commissioner Passenger.
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye. So we will come back with more policy later. But we'll keep meeting here from now on. All right, well, with that, we'll be moving on to continued business with item number 6, which is a work session on the Grand Mound sub-area plan and our final thoughts on that. We have Caitlin Nelson here today.
Am I? Everything's backwards.
You want us to move that post a little farther into your way?
you wanna move around the corner, Caitlin?
Turn the screen upside down?
Need a beer.
I have an idea. Get the chair on the other side of the table.
Dinner back to us.
Good evening, planning commissioners. I am Caitlin Nelson. Excuse the technical difficulties. In preparation for this meeting, you were provided with a copy of this PowerPoint and a staff memo with detailed changes that were made to the draft Grand Mound sub-area plan and several important considerations for expanding an urban growth area. Planning Commission has held 5 work sessions, a community open house, a public hearing, and several recommendations on other pieces of the Grand Mound sub-area plan have been made. The remaining pieces are the draft sub-area plan and the consideration of a UGA expansion and rezone request for the Wilmowski property. Following a Planning Commission recommendation, the UGA expansion request would go to the UGM committee, which includes a representative from each jurisdiction within Thurston County. And they will provide a separate recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners prior to their review and public hearing. We are going to start with the draft Grand Mound sub-area. Like previously mentioned, there is a more detailed breakdown of changes to the draft since the last work session located in the staff memo. But some general changes include additional info on the growth management act goals, existing development in Grand Mound, environmental features, state laws, protection of the aquifer, additional info on Rochester, the TRPC transportation report, newly emergent issues for the community of Grand Mound, and the funding dedicated to the water and sewer system. And these were changes made based on the last work session. There are topics that have been discussed as previous work sessions as well that are addressed in the county comprehensive plan around housing and health. There's information on affordable housing needs with specific information on Grand Mound, goals and policies related to providing affordable and diverse housing, information on drinking water and aquifer protection for Grand Mound, and related goals and policies for that as well. What are my updates for the draft? Is there any discussion needed, or is Planning Commission ready to make any kind of recommendation?
Yes, Commissioner Wheatley. You're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, boy.
Do we have a number that she could call in?
Yeah, it was provided in her link.
Do you have the phone number on your link, Commissioner Wheatley, that you could call in if you're having?
Okay, I got there. Oh, man. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So Caitlin, can you explain a little bit the changes regarding affordable housing that have been introduced since the last meeting, or did I understand that correctly?
No, so the affordable housing policies were I'm stating that those are a part of the county comprehensive plan. So we don't want to overlap policies between the Grand Mountain sub-area plan and what we already have in the comprehensive plan. So I have not made additional changes to the Grand Mountain sub-area plan in this most recent draft because we have policies in the county comprehensive plan. And I also have not received any recommendations from the planning commission at this point on policies that should be included specific to Grand Mound.
Okay, so Mike, I have a further question then regarding the comprehensive plan policies. Do they address equity at this point? Because the reason I ask, just to be really clear, is I still continue to believe very strongly that regardless of whether the county has had time to do the overall comprehensive plan update, I believe the intention of the legislature is crystal clear that from here on out, they want planning for equity, regardless of whether it's part of the comprehensive plan update or something like this that is part of the comprehensive plan. And it is an update, you know, regardless of whether it came before or after the overall update. And let me just say, I mean, I have, you know, this is what really makes or breaks it for me. There is no discussion in the goals and actions section about housing or affordability that I can see. And over the break, you know, I had asked at least a couple of times for a more refined demographic breakdown of the UGA. And the UGA has been designed by, its boundaries are set by census tracts. So it's a simple matter, in fact, to do a very quick, easy analysis of the UGA and housing issues and equity, because the census tract data is provided in fine-grained detail regarding percentage Hispanic population as against total population, the numbers of households in each individual tract, and how many of those are officially Hispanic. And over, as far as I could tell, and I'm not real super good with spreadsheets, so I painstakingly just did the map in every single census tract. And I came up with over a third of the official population of the UGA being Hispanic. And that's the official population. There's probably even more, you know, Hispanic folks who didn't make it into the census. So we know that the UGA has a very significant population of Hispanic, sorry, my dogs decided to defend the house, of Hispanic members of this UGA. And we can know exactly where the majority of them live. And in my analysis, I found that the majority of the population of the UGA happens to live just to the east of that Wilmofsky property that we're going to be talking about, in that dense housing, you know, sort of just right to the east of Wilmofsky. But the Hispanic population does not live in that new dense urban housing. The Hispanic population lives on a chunk of it lives across the street from that. I don't know. I didn't look to see if that's a mobile home park or what that is, but there's a mobile home park with a substantial Hispanic population. And then to the southeast, in the kind of more rural-ish part of the UGA, there's Hispanic population. And up on the kind of corner nearest Rochester, there is a concentration of Hispanic population. I am concerned that if we do not incorporate some kind of goals and actions regarding the risk of displacement, then especially since it looks like the rezoning has been to make virtually the whole area relatively dense residential, or, much of the area based on the map in the new version. I think if we wait for the periodic update and then applying that to Grand Mound, it may be too late for these people. And I don't think there's any good reason why their needs could not have been considered in this process. And I think I've made a fairly consistent request that be done. So I do have other concerns that I could talk about, but they're fairly niggling, for me compared to, this is a big one for me. It's kind of it's the showstopper for me. It's the reason why I would vote no to move this forward, because I don't think it'd be that hard to address this. I don't think it would take that long. I think it's reasonable. I think it's consistent with what the state legislature and the Department of Commerce have made very clear is the expectation for comprehensive planning going forward. And this is part of the comprehensive plan. It is an update of the comprehensive plan. So thanks.
Do you have proposed goals and policies based on what you think is lacking in the comprehensive plan or the sub-area plan?
Well, I guess, most bluntly, I think a plan needs to be developed to prevent displacement of this population when it's clear that that with densification, that population is not getting housing in the new housing. It's in the old housing. And I've talked about this over and over again. So in terms of goals and actions, I'd say, well, the goal would be to develop a way to prevent displacement. And the action in some way would be to carry out the policies that are developed in order to do that. If we could get some language that makes this a priority so that it's dealt with in the within the coming year rather than years out, that would make me more favorably disposed.
I guess, Helen, I'm confused. I don't quite understand what you're getting at. I don't know how we're gonna displace people by moving this property into it, if we decide to move it into a UGA. Property that's vacant ground that's currently zoned 1 to 5. I don't know how that displaces anybody.
We're talking about the sub-area plan right now.
Alan's concern is for the whole sub-area plan, not just the Womoski property.
Okay, but even with that, I mean, I went out there and I drove the area. I took photographs of all of the different properties. I wasn't here when you voted on all the previous things. Obviously, I was not present and I didn't hear that conversation, but I sent Polly a couple of the pictures I took of specifically the Womoski property that's setting up, as you pointed out, right up against that dense housing area with their property vacant on the other side of it, zone 1 to 5 acres. But even the Grand Mound sub-area plan, I don't know how the urban growth area there, as it currently is written, I don't understand how it displaces anybody. They're already there. I guess that's where I'm confused.
Go ahead,
Well,
Commissioner.
it's just what I mean by displacement when say the Department of Commerce talks about displacement, what they mean is that you have an existing population, and especially one that is a minority population or in some other way kind of subject to being harmed more often than helped by a lot of planning policies. What they mean by displacement is that by doing certain policies, you inadvertently or on purpose wind up forcing them out. So for example, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and I lived in neighborhood off of Killingsworth Street that was pretty heavily African-American. And those folks have all been displaced, and they all live out near Gresham now because they could not afford, it's not an African-American neighborhood anymore. So that's what displacement is. It's when policies inadvertently have an impact on people because their needs were not considered when the policy was passed.
Okay, I'm just gonna say again, I'm still confused because I didn't read anything in the subparagraph plan that would cause any of that to happen. So I guess I'm just asking what in there specifically is the problem?
Sure. So I've heard from a lot of public comment, a desire that Grand Mound remain rural. Even though the Rochester sub-area plan says make it urban and so forth, it seems like a fair number of people within Grand Mound want to keep it rural. And I did talk about this before. One of the elements of that is that rural means more affordable. And when if you look at the most recent version, and maybe somebody could pull that up, of the suggested rezoning under the sub-area plan, I believe it's all, it looks like, and maybe we need to clarify this, but it looks like all of it has been shifted to being relatively dense. And there's a fair bit of documentation that if you bring in dense housing and new housing into a low income or rural area, it's going to raise the price of housing. And so that's the concern. And it's a matter of the legislature passed legislation to amend the Growth Management Act to specifically address this. The reason why they did that is they came under a lot of pressure from folks who had been living near what became transit stations and things like that, where these populations suddenly found they couldn't afford to live there anymore. So it's a real phenomenon. It's an element in the housing crisis. And it's simple enough. I believe the population is so small in this little UGA that something could be done to help protect these folks. We know where they are. We kind of have a sense of what the threat is to them. And I think if we had looked at the demographics earlier, we could have had this already here. And it's just from my having sat down with the census data, I'm more convinced than ever that there's really no excuse not to address it.
Okay, we got a couple more things to go through here, but I'll get to Commissioner Pessinger and Commissioner Hanson and Commissioner Carmen here in a minute, but I wanted to go back to staff real quick. And before we even consider whether or not these policies are going to affect equity negatively, I want to, if we could hear from staff, what the plans for implementing equity policies are for the county on now or in the comp plan, or how and when it is the appropriate time to do that.
So with the changes to the GMA, the legislature has directed counties and cities who plan under the GMA to ensure that certain additional things are updated in their housing element in their comprehensive plan. And we need to align our housing element of our comprehensive plan to those changes, which are some equity and affordable housing pieces that the law discuss. There's a lot of background work that we need to do in order to appropriately accommodate the law into our comprehensive plan policies, but it's in the county's housing element of the comprehensive plan where we need to make those changes and adjustments, because sub-area plans or community plans, depending on what community you're working in and what they call them, are plans that are to be specific for that particular area. So you take the comprehensive plan and you apply it, And then if there are things that would only apply to a particular sub area, like Grand Mound, then you have more specific rules for that area that apply only in that area. So to answer your question, Commissioner Casino, we're required, and what we understand and what our attorneys understand is that we're required, the county is required to update our comprehensive plan housing policies in the comprehensive plan, in the housing element of our comprehensive plan.
And that's the most appropriate and only route for doing it.
Correct.
Okay,
So just a quick question.
go ahead.
Does that affect the Grand Mound sub-area plan then?
It wouldn't affect it unless we had policies that were counter to the updates in the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan applies as well as a sub-area plan.
So the sub-area plan, once the comprehensive plan is done, would need to be amended to,
Not necessarily, again, only if there were policies or goals in the sub-area plan that contradicted any changes that we made to the comprehensive plan.
so the comprehensive plan rules or goals would apply to the sub-area plan.
That is correct. It is the big overarching
Still trying
umbrella,
to get my head around it.
Yes. and then they're layered on top of that.
Without getting too deep, from a staff standpoint, to develop these goals and policies for equity, to stop what you're doing now, to develop goals and policies for the Grand Mound sub-area plan, instead of waiting until we did the comp plan in 2024 and 2025, what would actually get done faster? Would you actually get it done faster for comp plan than you would GMA if we put this on hold for something that is going to get covered by comp plan?
Can you read?
So if we said, we're gonna stop this whole thing until you do some equity for Grand Mound, would it actually get done faster by doing equity, an equity portion through comp plan? Just because of your workflow and your timing and everything else?
So I'm still a little fuzzy, but what I'll say is that if we have to pause what we're doing and look at creating equity policies specifically for the Grand Mound that could also apply countywide
Mhm.
in the future, it would slow us down both on Grand Mound and all the other work. The board has, this is the board's #1 comprehensive
Yes,
planning.
the board
Docket item.
docket is clear that this is something that they want done
Correct.
very soon. Please, Commissioner.
I would suggest there's a third alternative, which is to do everything else and then set this aside until the comp plan portion is done and then bring this back.
It would automatically come back though.
Yeah.
The comp plan portion would automatically apply to countywide, including the sub area. Go ahead, Commissioner Day.
So I think the equity policy in the sub-area plan makes sense if you're gonna make other changes within the sub-area at this point. I don't know that we are, and the more I think about this, the more I think the current updates are probably useful. And most of the other zoning updates should probably wait for a comprehensive plan process where it can be informed by new policies. So I don't know that the county is also, legally precluded from developing goals and policies. I think that would be a mind-blowing shock to me, if it was.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's an accurate.
I don't know if, I
But-
think that'd probably be misstating to say they're precluded by law. They might not be able to by their workflow and schedule and staffing is.
And that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, especially since they didn't plan for it. If we spring this on them last second, which is right now, that we want a whole new part of Grand Mound, that's asking a lot. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I would just say, I think I'm thinking along the same lines as Commissioner Day in that the county attorney, am I getting that right? Is interpreting that this belongs in the housing element. I may have a different interpretation that this kind of language belongs in any part of the comp plan that addresses housing. And it should live right there along with it in any portion of the comp plan that does address housing, which would be addressed by the changes we propose to the Grand Mountain sub area.
Commissioner Carmen?
Well, two questions. One is, I don't understand the concept of equity. So I must be the only one in the room that doesn't. So I've lost half of that discussion. The second part, I don't know what you can do to prevent somebody from buying up that whole mobile home park and displacing that population and building houses anyway. The economy and the business and whatnot moves forward based on rules and regulations, but I don't care, unless you put rent controls or property controls and say thou shalt not be able to buy that property. I don't know why we're talking about this.
Well, I think you're to that whole discussion on the difference between gentrification and economic redevelopment. And there's obviously a whole range of opinions on that particular issue. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Messinger's had his hand up.
Commissioner Pessinger?
Thank you, Chair. While I strongly agree with Commissioner Wheatley's points and recommendations here, I also see some good points that Commissioner Day and Hanson are making. And I think that perhaps just right now, part of the problem is that it's just simply not, equity is just simply not even referenced. Like the word doesn't even exist in this. And perhaps at least a small step in the right direction is us just simply adding a sentence to this that says equity considerations are not being forgotten and will be taken into consideration under the comprehensive plan, growth management act, et cetera.
I think I would totally agree that, and too many things, but back to something that was said earlier, it's not that there's anything specifically that in this language that would cause displacement, it's the absence of the mention of the effort to prevent it.
Okay.
Is what I think stands out to me, because I think I agree with Commissioner Wheatley that the legislature is clear that if you're doing planning under the Growth Management Act, you have to plan to prevent the displacement. And they don't say how, and they don't say they're gonna do it. They leave it to
Yeah.
the local jurisdictions to figure that out at this point.
Commissioner Day?
And an example, so this might help ground it a little bit. So if you have a community that's, diverse, low income, maybe one of these, I was, looking at the map just a second ago, one of these mobile home parks. An example of what you could do is you could downzone that significantly. So if, we have to accommodate so many people in this Grand Mountain sub area, you could, and this is why I think this all makes sense to do under the full comprehensive plan review. You could downzone some of these places that have vulnerable communities in them. So it's less economically feasible to redevelop them. And then you could accommodate more population on a parcel like the Womaski property. So
So is
that's,
that our responsibility to downzone? I don't think it is it?
It's part of what could be
In this
proposed.
particular UGA?
not at this time in this conversation, not.
Right.
Right.
So in the
Okay.
future, so if we had a countywide policy that indicated this, I think you do need a specific component for Grand Mountain because this is a very high Latino Hispanic population and they are historically undercounted in the census. So you're
Right.
probably looking at like 35–40%.
Yeah.
So it needs its own special consideration so that when, we're looking at zoning maps and we're thinking about where some of these populations reside, that we're making decisions that help keep them from being displaced. So that would be something I think that we do in the future. I think Helen's right. But I think it's a timing issue in my mind. And it also leads me to think that we probably shouldn't be thinking about doing something like expanding the UGA to include the Womaski property at this point, because we haven't had that opportunity to build different policies and it changes the conversation we have as commissioners about what we suggest, because it creates some different considerations that we would want to bring into our discussions and thinking.
Commissioner Wheatley?
Well, Commissioner Passenger had his hand up first, so I'll yield to him if
I
that's,
don't think his has actually gone
I've
down.
made my comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I mean, there's a lot of things here and I don't want to take all night, but for one thing, I completely disagree, and this is kind of a, you know, a philosophical issue, I guess, about what we're doing here as planning commissioners. But I don't believe that our only charge is to follow the current GMA. We are not the planning department. We are the planning commission. And we are doing our work conjointly with the planning department, but that doesn't mean that we have to do what the planning department does. And our charge is different because we are a citizen body. And it is our responsibility to know the RCW. So if you don't understand equity, it was a major initiative in the last couple of years in changing the Growth Management Act, and I can suggest some resources to look at for that. But more to the point, we have to, you know, it's our charge to think holistically. We think about what the state is trying to do. We think about other policies like Sustainable Thurston. We have to think about the climate mitigation plan. There's a lot of elements that we, as the Planning Commission, are actually responsible for considering, unlike, you know, we are freer in that sense than the planning department. And I think that's a really important point. And I think in this case, it's kind of overthinking it. We could certainly have some pretty straightforward language in the sub-area plan that calls out the fact that, you know, as part of the description of the sub-area, and if we had done this very basic demographic research, we'd have the facts and figures and the maps to put into the sub-area plan to talk about it as part of the description of this sub-area. It's a significant point. It's important to know that this is a very large Hispanic population in this UGA. So it should be in the description. And then in terms of goals and actions, as we discussed here, it needs to be called out that there needs to be action on preventing displacement and reaching out to the significant Hispanic population. I think it was kind of a mistake a long time ago with the public participation that this wasn't done. But, you know, that's water under the bridge. But there's nothing preventing us from having this put in as a goal and action to you know, whether or to have a goal and an action to develop a plan to protect this population from displacement. And I don't think it necessarily has to be related to the overall policy. I think, as I said, I think it may be too late by the time that ship grinds into the harbor, you know. And so we can say that. We can say there should be some work on this specifically to this sub area. And I think it's important to do that because in terms of kind of this plan as a legal document, it's important to get that in there. And honestly, you know, it's 2023 and we should really care. And it's, you know, almost Martin Luther King Day, and we need to be proactive. And that's that, as far as I'm concerned, as a citizen on this planning commission.
Let me ask this question to the commission. If we changed our order of what we were doing here tonight and we took a vote on Womaski first and say that the Womaski recommendation was to not include the UGA in the rezone. And then we think about Womaski being a no and what the other no's are on these 8 requests. Would that affect equity enough or leave it status quo enough that the equity question could be handled at the comp plan level for the next year and a half until the comp plan is done, so we can at least get GMA moving forward with everything else that's good in there for everybody? Because there's a lot in the sub-area plan that is going to help more than just the equity question. And to keep those people holding off longer and longer and longer is a big ask for something that is going to come in the next year or so anyways. Does that move anybody's needle? Go ahead, Helen.
Well, it's not, the plan, the goal is for the plan to be done in mid 2025. And then the implementation of it, we couldn't expect until 2026. So, and I've already heard comment from some staff member, I don't know, I don't remember who it was, that, you know, I think it might have been, well, I don't know who it was, but you know, that deadlines can always be extended. So I have no faith that this is going to happen anytime soon in terms of the revision of the comp plan. And I don't understand why it would be so difficult just to put some language in there about this. I'm not asking for the moon, I don't think. It's
Commissioner Wheatley, could you just give us an example of how much language and what you'd like it to say? So that if this is something we can do real quick to get this through, I'd like to give these folks down in Grand Mound a path forward.
Yeah, well, and I thank you for the comment on the Womofsky property, because I do agree with that, that taking it out of consideration, since this is, you know, this is kind of the
I'm
imminent.
not saying take it out of consideration. I'm saying we vote for it first, vote on it.
Well, yeah, right. Okay, yeah. I mean, but if we took it out of if we kept it out of the UGA, it would help with that imminent threat, I think, because that would become another density point that's right next to where these populations are. So that is a concern. Well, as I said, I mean, I think it would be, I didn't write language, but I think where it would go would be into the goals and actions. We would have, you know, this sub-area plan, to me, it's surprising. There's nothing, it has nothing to say about goals and actions for housing specifically, I don't think. So I think we create a category for housing, goals and actions, and within that, we point out, and we maybe also put it into, I mean, the problem I'm having with putting it into, say, the introduction and the description of the sub area is that that work was not done to do this basic demographic analysis that I asked for. And so, you know, we don't have that. I would love for somebody to spend an hour.
I think that people are under the
did.
presumption that there is a high concentration and it's at risk. So I think that's a
Right.
given.
So I think it can go into, I mean, if we create a category of goals and actions for housing, and we said in that a goal is to make sure that the people who currently live in, you know, to recognize in particular that there is a very substantial Hispanic population.
Yes.
That it is a goal that they not be displaced, and then a description of an action, that a policy be developed to specifically address the population at greatest risk of displacement within Grand Mound, you know, and maybe put a timeline on it, you know, to say that be undertaken immediately or something like that. I don't want it to wait, because I think if we wait, it'll be possibly too late.
Caitlin, how hard would it be to develop that goal and policy with it?
The way that we've been talking about it tonight compared to previous work sessions, I think that putting together something simple on demographics
Yeah.
and something about equity and housing as far as a goal and action would be pretty simple. In our previous conversations, I think it was about the GMA and the legislature, and that's not something we can consider at the time, but as far as something general like that, yeah, I think that would be fine, and I could provide a draft at the next meeting.
Commissioner Wheatley, if would that be satisfactory? Commissioner Day, you had some more?
Yeah, I mean, that would be real progress. Thanks.
Chris, will that work out?
So that's the pleasure of the planning commission.
Okay, so why don't we, go ahead.
I've been looking for the email update I was reading and I can't find it, but I just want to point out that what I've been reading recently about the middle housing bill that's coming around again this year in the legislature and the push to address displacement is that displacement there's three different types of displacement. There's economic displacement when you upzone a property and it becomes worth more, and then developers have the incentive to develop more housing, and then people can't afford it and they have to leave. There's cultural displacement, and I can't find the third. I can't remember it. And I wonder if Helen remembers, but I think that we should find that information and address holistically the issue of displacement and not just think of it as economic alone, because I've read recently that there's three different pieces to this puzzle that the legislature is thinking about.
Can that be reflected in your goal and policy, do you think, Caitlin, if you could find that?
Possibly.
I'll do what
I
I can
really
to find
have
it and send it to you. I'll call Representative Bateman's legislative assistant and see if they can help.
Commissioner Pessinger?
Just to follow on to Commissioner Hanson's comment, I think either that third element might have to do with climate impact, which is often disparate by different races, or it might have to do maybe staying in the economic side, but not just limiting it to housing. It might have to do with, business districts and or businesses where, services are provided to different cultural communities.
Okay, well,
I'll
why
see
don't
what I can
One
do.
more resource, I mean, if we're gonna be revisiting this, and Joel, it kind of goes to what you're bringing up. The state has an equity map. I'm trying to remember which department it is. It might be the Department of Health. They create an equity map, and it might be worth looking at because they break it down by types of inequity that specifically apply to geographic areas. I think it's not broken down more than, it sort of cover the whole Rochester Grand Mound area on their map, but it may give some, the disparate health impacts is another element of inequity, but it has all kinds of elements, transportation, the number of accidents, the number of low birth weight babies. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into it. So just a reference and maybe an incorporation of an acknowledgement that this is an area that, according to the state of Washington, has disparate health impacts, according to this inequity map. I think it is the Department of Health. You probably know better than I do, but that gets to Joel's issue as well.
Thank you. We're gonna, we'll let staff work on that goal and policy to be included in this plan, and hopefully we can wrap this up very quickly, but let's finish up with our discussion on Wamoski and get that done. And hopefully when this equity goal and policy comes back to us, we can wrap this up and send it off to BOCC, because these people in Grand Mound deserve a path forward. They've been waiting a very long time. You got something for Wamoski?
Yep, yes, I do. Okay, the Wolmowski property. A request to expand the UGA and amend the zoning from rural resource residential 1 unit per 5 acres to residential 4 to 16 units per 1 acre. This property is about 29 acres. And the proposal could add up to 464 potential residential units. There are several considerations that should be made when determining whether a UGA should be expanded, including state law, the sub-area plan, the county comprehensive plan, the countywide planning policies, characteristics of the proposed zone, and public comments. I also wanted to take a second here to look at this property and the surrounding properties. The more intense development to the east and the southeast is a density of about 6 units per acre, which is within the density limit of the R3 to 6 units per 1 acre of that zone. Some of the smaller properties to the west and north are developed at about 1 unit per 1 acre, but the properties immediately south and west of the Wolmowski property are developed at a density of 1 unit per 5 acres. So there are a few properties that are in the RRR 1 to 5 zone that are smaller than the allowed density, which may be due to the development taking place prior to the zoning regulations, or perhaps there were exceptions made for something like a cluster development. But the more intensely developed properties in the R 3 to 6 per 1 acre are developed within those limits of that zone. So this rezone is a proposal requesting to allow up to 16 units per 1 acre, which is significantly larger than the maximum units next door. Okay, state law states that based upon growth management population projections, the county shall include areas and densities sufficient to permit the urban growth that is projected to occur in the county for the succeeding 20-year period. The Washington Administrative Code provided in your memo also states that the UGA may not exceed the areas necessary to accommodate growth projections. The county uses TRPC buildable lands report, which includes a land market supply factor and estimates that the UGA has an excess capacity of 18%. And a healthy percentage of excess capacity is between 10 and 25%. So we're kind of right in the middle there.
Is that currently, or is that over a 20-year period?
That was the 20-year projection.
18%?
And how much of that is infill?
I don't know what percentage of it is, but I know that they consider infill in their projections. So they look at what the chances of certain properties redeveloping. They remove it if it already seems like it is a newer development that is not likely to be redeveloped. And then obviously empty property.
So there is that was a market factor analysis for the area?
Yes. The Grand Mountain Sub-Area Plan also states as goal 1 to provide sufficient land use capacities to maintain the rural character and projected population forecast for Grand Mountain. There are several applicable goals and policies in the county comprehensive plan. Policy B10 of goal 1 of the comp plan states that rezoning of any parcel with a rural designation to a different designation should only occur when one of these items is true, including circumstances have substantially changed since the current land use designation or zoning was adopted, and the definition, characteristics, or location guidelines for the current district no longer apply. The rezone would promote the general welfare of the affected community. The rezone would maintain or enhance environmental quality, or that the county pursues a legislative rezone. B could be applicable here if the planning commission agrees that additional housing in this zone would promote the general welfare of the community. But this policy is a little bit more vague than some of the other ones we go over. Some other policies within goal 2 of the comp plan state that urban growth areas should contain areas characterized by urban growth. This property is currently undeveloped, but the rezone would allow the potential for growth. 2, urban growth areas should be served by or plan to be served by municipal utilities. And it does appear that this property would be served by utilities. Policy 5 states that urban growth areas should follow logical boundaries and consider citizen preferences. And 7 states that an expansion of an urban growth boundary should ensure provisions of transportation, water, and wastewater. And then policy 8 states that an expansion of an urban growth area boundary should meet one of the following 2 criteria. Either there is insufficient land for the projected forecast, which we have found is not the case here. Or B, there can be shown an overriding public benefit. In addition to those policies, policies C1 and C3 of goal 2 in the comprehensive plan state that the county should encourage infilling in areas already characterized by urban growth that have the capacity to provide public services and facilities to serve urban development. And when urban services and utilities are not yet available, require development to be configured so urban development may eventually infill and become urban. So while there are some goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, this proposal meets, it would not meet goals regarding the prioritization of infill development. The county should aim to accommodate projected growth first within set boundaries if possible. standing UGA to provide area for new growth. Similar to previous comprehensive plan policies that I mentioned, under countywide planning policy 2.4, it requires the demonstration of a public benefit, but also mentions having an overriding public interest in that benefit. Okay, when we rezone a property, another consideration is what the purpose of that zone is and whether the property fits the purpose. The R 4-16 per 1 acre zone is characterized by a few different things, by a lack of physical limitations, the proximity to the urban core or incorporated areas, the availability of urban services, a likelihood of future annexations, superior transportation access, and designated areas within the Grand Mound UGA to ensure more compact development. So within that purpose of that zone, this property does seem to lack physical limitations, but it is located about 2,000 feet from the urban core, and it's located on local county roads instead of a major collector, and may not have the best transportation access. There were several public comments received against an expansion to the UGA or a rezone, several comments requesting keeping Grand Mound small or rural. And one comment requesting a lower density for this property if it is approved like R 3-6 per 1 acre instead of the R 4-16 per 1 acre. There was also a comment from WashDOT with concerns over additional traffic. Some comment in support of growth, but mostly connected to applicants or for the purpose of providing job variety. And no comments in support of this specific property proposal, I believe.
Caitlin, when you are talking about this public comment section, is this only from the open house and forward?
From the open house and the public hearing, that's generally,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when it says no comment in support of the specific property, the applicants have been here and provided public comment.
right,
Yeah,
I mean,
multiple times.
other
Okay.
than the applicants. So in summary, there may not be enough evidence to support an expansion to the Grand Mound UGA. State law and comprehensive plan policies state that infill should be prioritized first over UGA expansion. The proposal is unlikely to provide an overriding public benefit, and is therefore not consistent with several goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, the sub-area plan, and countywide planning policies. The buildable lands report states that Grand Mound is already on the high end or in the middle of excess capacity of available housing for population projections over the next 20 years. Affordable housing cannot be a condition of the property to rezone. The surrounding residential density, including to the east within Grand Mound, is significantly less dense. Access to the property may not be sufficient for the potential development, and public comment does not support the proposal outside of the applicant interest. So with that, would the planning commission like to discuss or make a recommendation?
Yeah, we'll start the discussion. Does anybody here in boardroom want to start?
I've got one question. The CRPC put the market, whatever, I can't remember the exact term, but market factors at 18%. Where would we be if we were to change the zoning on this property?
Sure, so it's at 18% excess capacity. A healthy range is 10 to 25. I believe their report shows less than 1% of a difference in change. So I believe it's somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8%.
So if we were to vote to move this, to recommend moving this forward, we'd still be under 20%.
Yes.
Commissioner Wheatley.
Thank you. Just in terms of the policy part of things to consider, I would like to sort of read into the record, I guess, RCW 3670A 110, which is the comprehensive plans, urban growth areas, paragraph 4 says, in general, cities are the units of local government most appropriate to provide urban governmental services. In general, it is not appropriate that urban governmental services be extended or expanded in rural areas, except in those limited circumstances shown to be necessary to protect basic public health and safety and the environment when such services are financially supportable at rural densities and do not permit urban development. The reason I'm reading that is to remind us again of the genesis of the Grand Mound Urban Growth Area. It was not, it is usually the case, and it's part of a lot of our policy in Thurston County in a general sense, that growth should happen in the metro area and not in the South County. And the reason that there's a UGA here originally, the sort of foundational reason is for public health and safety reasons, and not in order to create an urban area, a UGA that is not attached to an actual urban area. That's, you know, in the world of comprehensive planning, that's kind of a weird outlier. So we need to keep that in mind. To my mind, when I look at those great photos, what they tell me is that the boundary is working, that the UGA side stops at the boundary, and then rural Thurston is on the other side with that good prairie soil and with a farm. And we have a lot of county policy about not losing farmland, not losing prairie soil, on and on. So, so I think that we need to keep that in mind. That picture shows us that that boundary is working, and we need to think about the larger charge to protect the rural character of this area.
Commissioner Carmen?
Under the staff summary part, Caitlin, it says affordable housing cannot be a condition on the property to rezone.
Correct.
Everybody knows supply and demand. The more supply you have, the less pressure there is on prices going up. So I guess I don't understand that statement. And it's counter to what Ellen has been saying, as far as the legislature is talking about with, I guess, equity. And so.
The word affordable has been used in our previous discussions regarding the property. Affordable housing is generally considered a state definition. So if we're talking about the potential to develop residential properties here, they could develop residential units or whatever else is allowed in that zone to whatever quality they would like. They could do condos, they could do a hotel, if that, not a hotel. They could do a range of potential residential type of housing units. So what I'm saying is that there would be nothing holding them to a specific type of housing. It may supply housing to add to the market, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be for a certain demographic.
You can't condition the rezone to say thou shalt build.
Do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily gonna create greater supply, because I mean, even our great governor has said he wants to build a whole bunch of lower cost units in order to keep costs down for people.
Commissioner Pestinger?
Thank you, Chair. I have several comments. First is a big thank you to the staff. I really feel like this sort of presentation has a lot more of the checklist of, you know, where do we stand in relation to a lot of the required elements. And this is what I had asked for earlier. And I feel like a lot of effort was put into that. So I just want to thank the staff for that. I want to just check in. It sounds like the staff is recommending against this, but is that clear? Is that true?
Staff doesn't make a recommendation. We provide the information to the planning commission who makes the recommendation.
Okay. Another clarifying question. You said that if we were to rezone this, that the maximum number of housing units that could be available was it 164 or 464?
464.
So just then for clarifying, we're talking about Grand Mount has a total population of about 1,300 or 1,350 people.
Yes, I believe so.
And so I'm struggling to understand, we're saying right now the current excess capacity for housing is approximately 18% over the next 20 years. And yet we're saying that the addition of the potential addition of 464 housing units, which most houses have an average of 2.7 occupants, how that would not increase the housing stock to way above 50 or 100% of expected capacity is beyond my mathematic capabilities. It doesn't seem like it would just be 0.6% increase. But I'll just throw that data out there. And then third, I am opposed to this change in zoning for all of the many reasons listed by the planning staff of non-compliance, including related to the housing stock, related to overriding public benefit. But the area I'm probably the most concerned about is the critical nature of the aquifer, and this being a critical aquifer recharge area, and never mind diminishment of potential farmland and all those kinds of things. I would vote against this simply related to protecting the aquifer.
Scott, do you got anything? I wanted to give my thoughts on this a little bit, and I think that we should also consider that now if we are going to have an equity policy, goal and policy in there, that might include downzoning and removing some infill. That would make the housing stock, that would affect it. And I still believe that, especially down in the southeast area, where we've done some rezoning to more commercial, and we know that the tribe is expanding, I think we're going to be losing a lot of housing stock in that south end. And I think that if we do have these equity policies in there to protect some of these other potentially displaced communities through downzoning, that's more housing stock that we're going to be losing in that. So I think our excess is going to be dwindled away to near nothing. And the idea of adding some high density homes right there, I think it's a really good idea to do this. I understand there's a lot of competing interests on this, but it's really hard for me to believe that adding a bunch of houses down there isn't going to alleviate some of the market pressures on a lot of the other folks. Please.
So I think a lot of the barriers, and if we were talking about this in the context of like redoing zoning maps for comp plan update, this would be a completely different conversation. And I think that's the right time to think about it. I think long-term, I'm not sure that I agree that this, I think, well, here, I'll back up a little bit. If we want to balance things like displacement and equity, like we have to find, like, this is we need to find give in the system. So if we wanted to do something like protect low income or, high risk of displacement communities, we do have to find other ways to accommodate that. If the current assumption is that those are part of that housing, the available housing capacity. So I'm not sure that I think to Kevin's points, I don't think I agree that it's necessarily a bad idea to have this type of housing on the Wolbosky property. I think it's the wrong time to suggest it. First, for all the kind of legal hurdles that we'd have to clear, it's not clear that, it's even legal or would be supported. But if we're doing it having this conversation in a different context, I think it gives us a lot more kind of dials to turn, things to think about. We could do it under hopefully a county policy on equity and housing displacement. So that would be kind of my pitch, but I think I agree with Eric. I'm not sure that I agree that the property is not suitable for development, just generally speaking, but I think you have to do it the right way. And I think that's thinking holistically about the sub area.
Commissioner Pessinger, you had more?
One last comment on that. I think it's important that we not look at equity only in the context of housing and displacement, even though that is probably one of the most important elements. When I talked to my friend on the school board in Rochester and told him about the new 34% number and exactly which areas they lived in for the Hispanic population, his first phrase out of his mouth was, "Oh, I bet they all work for such and such company or for the tree farms." And their employment opportunities and whether or not we're increasing or decreasing their employment opportunities is part of the equation. Transportation impacts and availability to public transportation and other things as part of the impacts. Access to healthcare and impacts for what's the area's health in terms of, is there toxic substances, is the groundwater clean, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things have historically proven to generally been non-equitable towards people of color. And so that's where I think we need to take a lot of things into consideration, but it's good that we're starting this discussion.
Does anybody else have anything on the Womaski property? All right. Well, we need to take a vote on whether or not to move forward with the Womaski property and an expansion to the UGA. So with that, we're working on item number 2 up there. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Please do.
I move that we make no change to the zoning of the Womaski property.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to make no change to the Womaski property. Is there any further discussion on this issue?
So if that goes through, then this is good. I mean, can it be changed later or is this good for how long?
No, next cycle, the property owner could ask for a land use change again.
Would their next opportunity be at comp plan or would it be at a sub area plan update?
So land use amendments are accepted by the county on a rolling basis annually. So they would have until November of this year to submit an application. It would be the Board of County Commissioners' decision if they docket it or not.
So I guess my thing is, I mean, it doesn't seem like we have the state with all this stuff and then plus the community, it seems like they don't want to change. But I'm kind of in favor of some more housing. I have a problem with the 16-to-1. I mean, if it was like 4 10 acre or something. That's my.
But Jim, when you get 4 to an acre, your housing costs go up and they're more expensive.
I totally get it, but it just seems like 16 to an acre in
It's
that,
very
in this
dense.
area.
Right? Don't we have to decide on what the applicant asked for?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
So
you
Yeah.
can. So yes, we do need a recommendation on what the applicant requested, which was expansion to the UGA boundary and the
Zone.
change in the zoning. But if the planning commission has an alternative to what was recommended, they can make, or
Or what was
requested, excuse me, they can make that recommendation.
and we could do that after this particular vote that. we're
I
in the
would,
middle of.
for clarity and being clean about the recommendations, I would ask that they be separate.
And we will do it
motions.
that way. Commissioner,
How long has the Womaski's been asking it?
We have, this particular application has been on and off the docket for at least the last 5 years.
okay, so our motion is for no change. If that motion fails, it means we are voting for a change. Correct?
No, if you're
Not
asking,
necessarily.
You'd need a new motion, I think.
right,
So I just think on everything else in Grand Mound on this go around, we've said, we've got this industrial deal that the county's already working on. Let's push it off. Let's let that play out before we go and change all this stuff. And I'm kind of at the same point here. We've got an entire comp plan review coming up, starting very soon. I think it makes sense to say, you know what, here's, you know, let's, if the commissioners want to look at add it as part of the comprehensive plan update and really kind of dig into it. Maybe there's some other, I don't know if there's other changes or what, but I mean, obviously there's going to be changes to a lot of things in our comprehensive plan. And maybe there will be something that will come out of it that if staff were to bring us this presentation in 2025, we'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Or maybe it's just gonna be a population thing where it's like,
All right. Well, it's been moved and seconded to make no change to the zoning and UGA boundaries concerning the Womoski property.
Was that the motion? Because I did not hear that. Let me get
Was-
clarification on the motion.
Move to recommend no change to the Grand Mound.
Sub-area plan. That's
Well,
what
wasn't-
that was.
There's a growth area, the UGA.
The UGA and the associated zoning with the Womoski property. Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Carmen,
Nay,
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
all right,
Commissioner Wheatley.
Aye.
Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
all right.
Commissioner Casino.
Nay. With that, we will not be making a recommendation to change the zoning or inclusion in the UGA of the Womoski property. Is there any recommended zoning changes that we could forward to the BOCC?
What was the one that you had mentioned that was like?
With the recommendation to
3 to
reconsider
6 or
a
something?
less dense zoning
Yeah,
adjustment?
I would go for that. I would change my.
Okay, that's a motion. Would anybody second that motion?
I think if we have a motion, just a point of order, if we have a motion for no change, that's essentially reconsidering a motion we've already voted on. And I think it would be out of order.
I agree.
All right.
No worries.
All right,
But
then,
it's something that would come up possibly in the comp plan then,
yeah,
in the review.
yeah. I think we'll need to take a look at it again, but
Yeah.
today is not the day.
I think we could make something like a recommendation to ensure that the Grand Mountain sub area is considered during the comp plan process.
Mhm.
I think that would be an appropriate.
Oh, before,
recommendation.
do you want to write a minority report on Womoski?
No.
No, neither do I. So you think that we should put together something for a recommendation that comp plan readdress Grand Mountain sub area?
Specifically to address the issues of displacement and possibly changing the urban growth.
Do you
Can
need
we
something
do
formal
that?
for that, or can you just put
Yeah.
that in the notes?
I'm sorry, are we still talking about Wilmotski's?
We're done with Womoski. We're done.
Okay,
We
you're
moved
talking
on.
about equity.
And I think my interest would be in trying to get something from the planning commission on the record that says, we think this is a priority. You know, we don't think it's right to do now, but we do agree that it's a priority to address this issue more holistically in a way that would include conversations about that Womoski.
Right. I would ask that the planning commission make that a recommendation or a statement to the, so that we can present it to the Board of County Commissioners.
Can you restate the motion?
I would move that we make a recommendation to address the Grand Mound sub-area plan during the comp plan update process. Specifically include
The urban growth boundary.
the urban growth boundaries.
What's your motion?
I can back it up. I feel like that's-
So you're thinking put all of the Grand Mountain sub area plan off until comp plan?
Do that.
So there's, if I can make a
Please.
ask for
Yeah.
clarification. Yeah, so there is the plan itself
Mhm.
that we have put on hold and we'll come back to you all with additional information.
Oh,
next time.
okay.
With
And
the
then
single
there is
subject of equity.
with this. Correct. And then there is readdressing or addressing land use changes within the Grand Mound sub-area
Sorry,
plan.
during the comp plan update.
Amendment. Yes, is that what you're?
That one.
Yeah.
That's a good director.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the motion is to address land use and zoning in the Grand Mound sub-area during the comp plan update. So,
Yeah,
Do we want to specifically call out any lenses through the lens of equity, through the lens of display, or any of that, or kind
I
of just
think we
leave
should,
it?
that should be in the,
Okay,
I think we'll have that covered by the changes staff are making.
Second that.
it's been moved and seconded to recommend relook at this during comp plan. We'll call for the vote on that. Oh, do we, I'm sorry, Commissioner Wheatley, please input.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm concerned, I mean, I'd have to hear the language again, but I'm concerned about opening up a really big can of worms of implying that the boundaries are open to, I think you're trying to aim at the Wilmofsky area or at the question of what's a good place to put housing, maybe. I'm not too sure what you're aiming at with this, but I'm really reluctant to open up the can of worms of whether the boundaries should be expanded in general. I mean, I'm a bit concerned about that, but I also just wanted to go back to this issue of density of zoning, residential zoning. I just really want to point out that in rural areas, the biggest threat of farmland conversion is from relatively low density housing. And so I think actually it's important not to encourage, if you're wanting to preserve farmland and make it affordable for farmers to farm that land and to keep housing affordable in rural areas, I think you have to think really hard about encouraging low density residential housing because it's been proven to be the biggest threat to the loss of farmland. So that's one of the reasons why even in a place like Grand Mound, you're looking at, if you want to encourage more housing, you want to make it dense. And the TRDC maintains statistics about this where they show that we are not as a county reaching our goals of preventing more development in rural areas, and this issue of density of housing is a big part of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I wouldn't expect that just because we start talking about housing in the UGA or expanding the UGA boundaries, that automatically means that we'd make it less.
Okay, Commissioner Wheatley, but we got a motion on the floor. And does your motion include a revisit of UGAs? I thought it did, to have a second look.
Only because that's what the comp plan update process does. I think the goal of the recommendation we'd be making is to ensure that Grand Mound is considered during that process.
Okay, that's fair.
So I think we'd get into, those would be discussions I think it'd be appropriate to have during that, during the actual update process. So you can have.
Could you reword the motion? I just want to hear the motion again.
Oh, gosh, you're gonna make me do that? I didn't write it down.
No, I don't know if she's
done.
You've got it, okay.
So what I understood was the planning commission is making a recommendation for staff to review land use and zoning within the Grand Mound urban growth area during the comprehensive plan update. There was no lens put on it. It was just to
just your normal
That's what
regular
I
planning
thought.
And
lenses.
It
so
wasn't
just to can I get clarification? So we're not talking about the boundaries of the UGA, we're just talking about within the UGA.
That's what I understood, if there is
That's,
a
all right, thank you.
Call for the vote.
Commissioner Carmen,
I,
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Wheatley,
Aye.
Commissioner Passenger,
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. So thank you for looking at that again during comp plan, and thank you, Caitlin, for bringing back that equity goal and policy for us on our last and final piece of the Grand Mountain sub-area plan.
And can I make one comment?
Please do.
I really appreciated this, Caitlin. The review of how this was put together as, you know, the changes that you recommended for the sub-area plan. I thought it was very clear, it was very concise, and I really appreciate it. I just wanted to know that.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're gonna move on to staff updates.
I don't have any updates for you all.
Didn't you recently pick up one new planner?
Did you?
Maybe just because I got an introduction today, I think that they're new, and maybe they're not as new as I think.
Maybe I guess
Course conversion.
yeah, so we did hire for the one associate planner in November. She started, so I guess that's when we're confused. But Dana Bowers has joined our planning team. She actually moved over from Public Works, so she was an internal hire. And we do have one associate planner position that is open, but that position is closed, and we're going through the hiring process right now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, by the end of February, we'll be a full house.
Okay. Next up is calendars. Our regular meeting for January 18th is canceled. But we do have a January 25th meeting, which is the Olympia Joint Plan meeting, where we're somehow going to cram everybody in here maybe. Or will they be joining remote, or do you think we'll all be here together?
We will find out.
All
I
right.
think we should get to sit up there and they have to sit.
I like that idea. Well, is anybody not going to be able to make it on the January 25th?
The timing of that I have on my calendar is 6:30 PM. Is that accurate?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like everybody should be here. With that, does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
I'll just say I was in the building today and I met the county's new sustainability, is that her title? Person,
You met Rebecca.
Rebecca.
She is
She's
the
a real
climate.
person,
Yeah.
private person.
Climate.
Yep, she's here. I met her in the flesh.
She does work for the Board of County Commissioners.
Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
I'd just like
I
to,
do.
Go ahead, Kevin.
that's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut him
No,
off.
that's all
Go
right.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so there is, on this topic we've been talking about, there is a guest speaker at SPSCC on Friday night, Dr. Mary Frances Berry, sharing her lecture, Making Diversity and Inclusion Effective, and that's at 7:30 PM. Tickets are $15.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Halverson.
I just wanted to remind, I think it's Polly, you could send Scott and I the information so we could make those contacts. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other, anything else go ahead, Commissioner Wheatley.
Thanks. This isn't really good of the order. I wanted to sort of raise these two things during the staff updates. I have two things I want to bring up for consideration. One of them is just, this is, I finished my first year. I'm curious, I want to be able to see how this moves forward to the Board of County Commissioners. And I wanted to make a request that when the CPD is communicating with the Board of County Commissioners about planning commission stuff, could we be CC'd on that? It would just make it a lot easier to track what's going on and what the plan is and when it's happening. If we were CC'd, I think probably all of us are really interested in seeing how our work unfolds as it goes on to the next step. So, so that's kind of a request that I have for you to maybe consider. And then I also want to make another request. Some of you may be readers of the Jolt, and you may have seen an article about how the Lacey Planning Department was meeting with the Lacey City Council to talk about their 2023 work plan. And I believe they probably do this every year because it's a good practice for planning departments to have work sessions with their county, with their policymakers, in our case, the county commissioners, at a work session. And I would very much like to request that we have such a work session to discuss the 2023 docket, preferably in February. I think it would really help me, certainly, to be able to have conversations with the commissioners about their thinking and what's coming up. And I would like to also have a sense of what the work plan is. And I believe that that would be an appropriate place to have such a discussion, not only about the items on the docket, but what the work plan, the overall work plan for the year is. This is a very normal thing for planning commissions to be doing at the beginning of the year. And so I would like to request that. And sorry, I couldn't figure out where to
That's
put that
fine.
into the agenda.
For your
But
input.
yeah.
I second both of those requests.
All right, thank you very much.
I would just say that when it comes to meeting with the county commissioners about policy, I strongly suggest against it because I believe we're supposed to be an independent body. They tell us what we want us to look at. I don't want the county commissioners telling us where we should go with it. You know, I think they say, here's the sidewalls. We want you to look at this, you know, at some points, this specific thing. I don't want anybody in here saying, well, we need to do this because that's what the commissioners want.
Yeah.
I want this group to do what we think is right. And have no input and no bias from the county commissioners.
And they have sent us formal communication stating that. Commissioners have, that we should not be looking to them.
I see those as two totally different things.
Yeah, I think that what Commissioner Wheatley was looking for was to have a discussion about the docket and how to build the docket. I do think that that is really a decision that the board makes on who they consult when making their docket, and that will be made through the county manager more likely than anybody else managing that kind of stuff. But I would encourage any citizen that if you have something to say to your county commissioners, reach out to their offices directly and let them know. That's part of being a good citizen, is talking to your representatives, including your county commissioners. With that, is there?
I'm sorry, may I chime in on the docketing real quick?
Oh, please do. We haven't seen you all night.
Hello, everyone. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning, for the record. Just in response to Commissioner Wheatley's request about docketing, we do an annual update to our Board of County Commissioners every single year. And that is actually scheduled for next week as the first kickoff. It is usually a very long process that goes all the way through March. So we're just beginning to introduce, we kind of do a status update on everything that's on the official docket already. And then we go over any new citizen applications or staff applications that we've gotten over the past year. As we move through that process, there's a kind of a stepwise manner that we move through. So the board has the opportunity to hold a written comment period. And then we take in written comment and we go back to the board and we have a discussion about what gets added to the official work plan. So we are kicking off that process next week. It's open to the public. It's available on the live stream on the YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
So
I have
that
a question about that.
One moment, please. Chris, go ahead.
I was just gonna give the date and time for that particular briefing with the board for the 2022-23 official docket discussion kickoff. And that is Wednesday, the 18th from 9 to 10 here in this boardroom.
Okay, Commissioner Wheatley?
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify. I think there's a difference between a general meeting, and I appreciate that information, but what I'm asking for is a work session, which is different because then the members of the Planning Commission are part of the conversation. So it's kind of qualitatively different to a general public meeting. So what I'm asking for is a work session. And to the objection that means that commissioners would be telling us what to do, I just want to say, we've often come up against, or at least I have, let's just put it this way, it puts an awful lot of pressure on the staff to get the words exactly right so that we can understand what the purpose of the docket items is as we deliberate over them. I am not worried. Maybe it's just my personality, but I am not especially worried about being overly influenced by any pressure from any county commissioner, but I would love to have clarity about why items made it onto the docket and what the language means. And I think it's a very reasonable request. It helps us do our job better.
Commissioner Pestinger?
Just clarification, maybe for Maya. So you said 2023 docket, and it's starting this next week and going through March. Is that determining the remainder of the docket for 2023, or this different time period for the docket?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Commissioner. So in early 2022, we set our official docket, I believe it was March or April of last year, and we set a docket for the biennium. So it's a 2022 to 2023 docket. And that basically means it covers all the way through the end of this year. So we don't need to open it and add anything, but we bring it forward to the commissioners so they can review any new applications that they've received, and they have the option to open it if they so choose to after they hold a comment period and consider what the public has to say. So yeah, we do a 2-year docket cycle.
And may I just add a further comment in that regard? If we have a work session with commissioners, the influence goes both ways. If we're feeling like there are certain things that maybe they should be considering to add to the work plan, it's an opportunity to tell them that. And I have specifically in mind, I would like to have some discussion with them about the periodic review.
Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner Halverson.
I was just gonna say, what Maya and the staff do with the docket, there are dozens of things on the docket that wait on that docket for years before they get prioritized by the commissioners to get staffed properly to execute those docket numbers. So there's a ton of things on there. Like the Wolmoski property, I guess, been waiting 3 to 4 years to get on the docket, 5 years. I mean, so there's a lot of things there. I don't know that it is our responsibility or anything to even make a suggestion as to what gets put on that docket ahead of something else. I don't think that's our area of responsibility.
You got something?
No.
Okay. Okay, well, I know that, one of the other factors there is that we have professional planners that line things up in very specific orders to get very specific things done. And that is a consideration that the board hears way before any of us would hear, and that we should probably respect that timeline, because they know, well, they're the ones that are actually putting those timelines together. But I think that that discussion has been had. So unless there's anything else, is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, our business is done. This meeting is adjourned.
That's it.